This is my 1978 Suzuki DR370. It's kind of a lie. This is well, the frame is somewhat a 1978 DR370. The motor was actually picked out of a 1981 Suzuki GN400. The footprint of those two motors are identical. You can fit both of them in the same frame. They're very similar. The only difference between the 81 and the 78 engines is this one is 400 cc's or 396 cc's to be exact. And the other one is a 370, which is a little bit smaller. That engine is also a points engine, and this is an electronic ignition engine, which is a lot easier to deal with, at least for me. This bike has quite a few modifications to it. This is the first off-road motorcycle I ever owned, and I want to say they're kind of rare. I don't know if that's true. I think they're kind of not sought after. This is a rather strange bike, and it was when Suzuki came out with it too. Mine is pretty, but when they initially came out, most people thought they were pretty ugly. They had a huge shovel-shaped metal fender on the back, and the front fender wasn't all that fun to look at either. It had a very short swing arm, all steel. The bike was very heavy, but the engine made loads of torque, and it was fun to ride. I've done quite a few modifications to this bike to make it raceable, I guess, to my ability. I've actually cut the frame in the front to change the rake of the bike. The original rake was about 31 degrees, and I have adjusted it to be about 26, 27 degrees, so it turns in a little bit better. Maybe not as stable in a straight line, but definitely worth it on a bike like this with as heavy as it is. I've also put an aluminum swing arm on this bike. This swing arm is off of a 78.5 RM250. I think the 125 and the 400 are the same for that year. For 78.5, they'd be the 250 C2 for that year, because the C is just 78 and the C2 denotes the halfway mark where they switched over to the aluminum swing arm. The shocks, I have no idea what they're off of. They're 13.5 inches long. They have very good dampening, and I've chosen springs from my assortment of springs to fit the bike, because the bike itself probably weighs about 250 to 260 pounds, which is rather heavy. The fenders are a mismatch of nonsense. I think they're 83 IT 250 or something, whenever the Yamaha is turned white. I've cut the fender quite a bit because I thought it was dragging at first in the front, but it really was not. I think that was just my imagination, because the back was actually dragging because of how short the swing arm was. The forks are off of a 1980 PE 175. They're just as thin as the original forks. I have some bigger forks I'd like to put on it, but I'm dealing with a steering stem issue where things just aren't fitting correctly. The bike is very, very, very fun to ride. The original motor is pretty gutless. There isn't much going on with these engines. I did quite a bit of port work on the inside of the cylinder head on the intake side. Didn't polish because I want the fuel to still tumble, but I did polish the exhaust port and made it slightly bigger, but this is still the stock header, so there isn't much improvement to be had there. I kind of welded the rest of the exhaust together in an awkward fashion, but it works and it's loud, so that's fun. 7/8 factory Suzuki Pro tapers that I ripped the pad off of. I don't know what the original bars would have been for this bike, but a really cool addition to this bike is the carburetor that I added to it. I think it is a TM36 dash something. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's the carburetor that it's a pumper carb is what it is. It is a push-pull throttle, so it does have the two cables so you can force the slide close in whatever situation requires you to do that. The airbox is stock, but I did put a uni-clamp-on filter on the inside and kind of rigged that together because this carburetor doesn't fit as well as the original carburetor. I know the original carburetor is rather sought after, at least the needle in it is. To my knowledge, I think the needle that was in the original carburetor on the Suzuki DR370, that may be the only bike that that needle was ever shipped on, I guess. And I hear it's pretty desirable. I unfortunately got rid of my original carburetor, but this carb does just fine. I just thought I'd make a video on this bike. I don't see a lot of DR370s out there. I definitely don't see a lot of YouTube videos of DR370s out there. If they are, it's somebody trying to sell it to me. I raced this one. This is my first motorcycle. I have a whole fleet of Suzukis now. This is my only 4-stroke Suzuki. It's a 400, but I also have an RM 400, which is a far cry from this. But this is still definitely a fun bike, and I would encourage somebody to race something like this as long as you can get the engine right. So yeah, I just thought I'd make a video on this, and hope you like it.